Hello, welcome to the Backwoods wreath-making tutorial video. Today I'm going to show you how to make your very own moss-framed wreath for Christmas.
Hi everyone, I'm Becky and I'm going to be helping Billy show you how to make a beautiful Christmas moss wreath. So here we go.
First of all, we start with a wire frame like this. This is just a steel wire that's coated in copper so that it doesn't rust. And we're going to put lots of this lovely natural moist moss onto the frame so that it holds moisture and stops the foliage from drying out, and the moss also gives us an anchor to put the stems of the foliage into. We're going to take a ball of twine like this. I've rolled mine onto a wooden dolly peg just to make it easier to get in and out of the wreath, and we're going to tie the string onto the frame like so. Do a granny knot, which is like 2 times round, so that it stays on nice and firmly.
What I've done is tied it around this crossbar so that the knot isn't going to slip up and down the circle.
Doesn't matter what it looks like because we're going to snip the tail off, and then it's going to be behind the moss of the wreath anyway, so it will get hidden. And then take a big handful of moss, as much as you can get in 2 hands, and place onto the frame.
This can get quite messy, this bit, so it's good to have some newspaper down on your table to avoid the dampness and little bits of moss.
And then we're going to wind the twine around the moss to bind it onto the frame.
Winding it around the peg does make things much easier. It means that you can keep it pulled tight while you're winding. Of course, if you don't have a dolly peg to wind it round, you can use anything. You could use a normal plastic clothes peg, you could use a little stick, pencil, whatever you want.
Keep going round, adding more bundles of moss as you need them. And if you're feeling it's a bit too fat, remove a bit of the moss, or if you're feeling it's a bit too thin, just put a bit more on. And the spacing of the twine should be about 2 to 3 centimetres, so about 1 inch, so that you've got lots of nice places to tuck all of the foliage under the twine when we come to decorating.
Can you see where the string is? Because I can't. But we're going to keep going anyway and trust that it will all turn out beautifully. What I'm doing now is just laying out my remaining moss to make sure that I've got enough of it on there, but I don't run out before I finish the circle. Ooh, lovely bit of pink in there. I think my wreath is going to be a bit chunkier at one end than the other, but I'm okay with that.
When you're coming to near the end, so I've got to here, and I started just here, so keep going round. You want to overlap slightly where you finished off, and then flip the frame over, and then tuck this bit of string under the wireframe and just tie a knot. And snip off.
And I'm just about to tie it off. I'm not sure exactly what knots I'm tying, but if you can't tie knots, tie lots. In fact, what I'm going to do for now is leave this bit of string in order to hang the wreath. But there we go, there is step 1 done.
So you should have a frame that looks like that. So we're going to put foliage all the way around. You don't have to do it all the way around, but I'm going to do it that way just for the purposes of the video. So now you can see here, I've got lots of different bits of foliage. This wreath is going to be quite a dark green with lots of red and really traditional Christmas colours in it. So I've got quite a bit of yew here. Yew is great because the needles of the stems go pretty much all the way around. So it makes the wreath a bit fuller, gives it more body. So with your secateurs, start snipping off some stems which are about 6 to 8 inches long. That's about 10 to 15 centimetres. Snip off lots of bits, and we're going to use all of these to poke under the string to make the base of the wreath, and we're going to put other decorations on top.
I'm going to start with some of this. It's quite flat, but it should give me a nice base to build up from. It doesn't particularly matter on these smaller ones, but especially if you get to some bigger twigs, it's nice if you cut them at an angle like that, which makes them easier to poke into the string.
You'll find that having some smaller bits and some larger bits are really helpful at this stage, so that you can fill in any gaps you've got with the smaller bits. So to start decorating, choose a piece. It's helpful if you've got quite a stiff woody bit of stem at the bottom. I'm going to show you what I call the tuck and shove method. Find a piece of string and you tuck the stem underneath it and push it into the moss. So it's laying flat like that. It's following the contour of the wreath frame. It's following the round, but your aim is to cover the moss. So keep going like that, tucking under.
As Billy said, generally the idea is to cover all of this moss with foliage, but I quite like the dusky pink colour that I've got going on over here. So I may or may not cover all of my moss with foliage. I'm going to have all of my foliage pointing upwards in a positive direction.
And I've also decided that I'm going to use a bit of this conifer as well. And it's got lovely bluey cones to the end of it. And I'm going to use these just dotted throughout the wreath base just to bring a different colour and a different bit of texture.
Now it might be at this stage that you realise that maybe you should have put a bit more string on. Maybe the gap should have been tighter, and if you don't have enough string on there, add some more string. And there we go, we've got a decent start. Ooh, gravity is working against me.
If you find you've got a bit that's a bit too long and it's going to be a bit floppy, just trim it down a bit.
In fact, what you can do is if you've got a few small bits, you can sort of bunch them together and tuck them all under the string at once. This lovely branch that's quite full, and the leaves I've used so far are quite flat, so I'm going to use this to give it a bit of volume. More of a work in progress there. Again, gravity is still working against me, but we'll see if we can do something about that. Let's start using some of this, which is lovely dark green, much darker green than I've been using previously. I'm planning to go for a sort of half and half design, which means that I'm having to be quite careful about exactly where I start and stop my foliage.
So I'm just going to use some smaller bits to fill in. So there we are, we've got the base finished. You can't see much in the middle, so if you want to, just trim some of the bits off like this, so that you make slightly more of a hole in the middle, so you can see it's a wreath.
I've got a branch that's crossing into my circle, and I don't like it. So what I'm going to do is take a piece of string and tie it in. Now, half fully foliaged and ready for some decoration.
Now for the top decoration. So I'm going to start off with some rosettes. These lovely rosettes that I foraged this morning. There are all sorts of things that you can forage. Rosettes, buried ivy, this wild clematis here, old man's beard, cones, all sorts of seed heads, but please ask the landowner's permission first. Of course, you can also go foraging in your own garden, in friends' garden. It's amazing what you can find that other people have got growing. So I'm going to put the rosettes dotted through. I'm cutting so there's a bit of slope on the bottom of the cut, so it makes them easier to push into the moss, and I'm just pushing them in so that I've got dots of dark red scattered throughout. Trim them so they're about that long. It really helps if there's an offshoot or a burr at the bottom, because that acts as a barb so that the stem doesn't pull out of the wreath again. Right, now I've got the rosettes in place. I'm going to put on some buried ivy, which looks like this. It's mature ivy that flowers and produces berries. Young ivy plants don't. You have to let them get to a certain age before they'll start. It's usually about 7 years. And these are beautiful. The bees love the flowers and birds love the berries a bit later on in the winter. So if you want to leave your wreath up or out in your garden after Christmas, you can, and birds will come and peck at the berries and the hips, and they'll often take some of the moss to make nests with as well. So the trick with ivy and lots of bits of foliage is to trim off the leaves, and the lower leaves anyway, but leave a little bit of leaf stem sticking out, which acts as a barb, so it stops the stems being pulled back out of the wreath base. Wonderful. So there's buried ivy all around as well now. Just adds another texture. Now I'm going to add some of this lovely silvery wild clematis or old man's beard. Now you can see there's a straight stem with no leaf joints or bits of leaf stem coming out. So we're going to wire these on. This is florist's wire, so it's reasonably thin and quite bendy, so you can bend it like so. I'm going to snip quite a good length off. That's about 15 centimetres, so what's that, 6 to 8 inches. And then bend it in half, so you've got something that looks a bit like a hairpin. Slot that so the loop here is over the stem and it's going to anchor it down. Push the straight ends of the wire, make sure they are straight down into the wreath, and with any luck they will come out the other side, and then you can pull that down, do a few twists, and then what I like to do is bend it back over and push the tails back into the wreath so that you haven't got sharp wiry bits sticking back.
I'm going to start covering the empty half of my wreath. Let's go for some pine cones. I've got several here. That's good. So I'm going to take quite a long bit of wire. I'm going to take roughly the middle, try and find a groove around the bottom. You can thread the wire into all the way around, like so. Put the wires around the back and twist them together. And there you go, firmly attached. Now I'm going to add some colour on the green side. I've gone quite traditional and I've got some holly. Got to have some holly on your Christmas wreath. Now hopefully it goes without saying that you need to be careful when handling holly leaves. Ow! I need to take my own advice about being careful with holly. Now I'm going to add these. So we now have some colour. I'm going to add a few pheasant feathers. Gorgeous. But it's curving the wrong way, so I'm going to use this one. Cut a little string there. Ooh, that's nice. Look at that. Add a bit more colour. I'm going to take one of these, which is a very funky little dried orange, clementine. I in fact have 3. I've got some green oranges. Hang on. I've got a cocktail stick. This move is called threading the orange. I've added some more colour. So I've got 3 cinnamon sticks. Lovely. I'm going to tie them together first. And I'm going to wire it on. There you go, nicely tied on. Let's try this first. I could put, yeah, I'll put that little guy there, and then we're done.
Just going to make a few adjustments, and feel free to do that whenever. And I think I'm going to leave that one there, because often less is more. So there you have your fresh foliage Christmas wreath.
And there you go, my finished funky half and half Christmas wreath.
It's ready to hang on your door now. You just need to make sure that the moss on the back is moist. If it's not moist now, then just lay it in a sink of water or a water tray if you've got one, just to keep the moss moist, which will help the foliage stay fresh. And check every few days to see if the moss is still moist, and do the same thing if you need to. If you haven't got too many dried things on the front, then you can get a water sprayer and just spritz the front to keep the foliage moist too. I hope you've had fun. Thanks for watching. If you need any more information, please see the accompanying sheet that we sent out with all of the kit list on. If you want to find any more info about any of the workshops we run here at Backwoods, please visit the website, which is backwoodsexperiences.co.uk.
I really hope you enjoyed this video, and please send us pictures of your finished wreaths. We would love to see your creativity. Have a very Merry Christmas!